Well, hey there, Winwood Baptist Church. It's good to be connecting with you through our online format. Thank you so much to those who are diligently watching these videos we send out of worship music, of devotions and Bible studies, and our weekend sermon to make sure that we continue to grow together, that we're all learning from the same passages, and in the case of our summer series, that we're all learning from the same people. Just thank you for that. I know this is different for all of us. It's different for me to be sitting down at my kitchen table trying to deliver a sermon instead of having a whole stage to walk across. But hey, it's what God's using now. And as a church, we always want to be a part of what God's doing. And Cody started last week with our first hero of the faith, talking about Abel. Today we talk about Enoch. Now, we all have heroes, often in a field of profession or in another field, just something we have an affinity for. We look up to somebody. I referenced a couple weeks ago that the ESPN did a documentary on Michael Jordan in the last season of the Chicago Bulls, and growing up in Southern Illinois, man, the Chicago Bulls were everything. And I remember just almost having an unhealthy admiration for Michael Jordan. And you know what? During that documentary, I continued to be amazed by his talent, by his drive to win. I appreciated some of his personal characteristics, but there were some things I learned about him I didn't appreciate quite as much. You know, I heard a line once that said, "Be careful." The essence was I couldn't find it, but the essence was be careful about learning too much about your heroes, because it may destroy them in your mind. And you know what? Probably if we really look up to a person, if we got to know who they generally are, there'd be some things that make us go, "Oh, maybe I wish I didn't want to know that." I tell you, church, over the course of the summer, we're going to talk about people that God listed in His Word as having extraordinary amounts of faith. And we're going to talk about characteristics of them that we need to mimic in our own lives. And we won't always spend time talking about how they were faithful to God. Today we just really look at how God used Enoch. But I tell you what, the more we get to learn about these heroes of the faith, the better they will become in our eyes and our hearts, and the more we will see that they are worthy of our, not just admiration, but of applying their lives onto our lives. Just kind of, if we can almost just lay those characteristics on top of us and say, okay, I'm gonna live like this, that we will find the more we know about them, the more that is true. So today we look at three characteristics of the life of Enoch. If you have not heard much about him, that's because there is not much about him to hear. So church, we're gonna learn what we do learn, or learn what we can know. And the first principle about Enoch's life that we're gonna learn from is that Enoch served as God's messenger. Enoch served as God's messenger. I'm going to read out of Jude chapter 1, 14 through 16. This is obviously Jude referencing back onto the life of Enoch. And it says, It was also about these that Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied, saying, Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his holy ones to execute judgment on all, and to convict all the ungodly of all their deeds of ungodliness that they have committed in such an ungodly way, and all of the harsh things that ungodly sinners have spoken against him. These are grumblers, malcontents, following their own sinful desires. They are loud-mouthed boasters, showing favoritism to gain advantage. Eli was commissioned by God to be a messenger to the people, and a messenger to people who were not living godly lives, to send a message to people who were purposefully going against God and going away from God. It was a rather harsh message. Just think about a corrective word that we may say to someone who's just incredibly out of line and they're heading towards just a destructive outcome. Think if you were a manager and you saw someone violating a crucial safety violation that could really get them seriously hurt or someone else hurt. Man, you wouldn't necessarily as a manager walk by and in a very sweet tone say, hey, maybe we should think about that. No, you'd be more like, hey, stop it. We got to follow that or you're going to get yourself hurt. Man, Enoch, he had a harsh word to deliver. God did not send him with a flowery message. God sent him with what God would have hoped to be a word that would have corrected them, not for correction's sake, but for relationship's sake. So that those people, that the ungodly people that Jude is referencing, that Enoch spoke to, that they would choose a different way and they would turn from what they're doing and choose to align their lives with Christ. You know, Enoch was a messenger. It's an unfavorable message. I don't think that many of us, or maybe even me myself, will be called upon to deliver such a harsh message. If we ever are, we should not be excited about it. I don't think Enoch, and it's hard to determine how he did this. Did he do this in a public setting? Did he do it once? But no matter how he did it, I don't think he was real excited to do it. I don't think he woke up that morning going, man, I just get to take a 2x4 and whack these people and straighten them out. Now, it shouldn't be like that. Tell you, church, Enoch was a messenger, and we're not all called to preach, but we're all called to be messengers. All right, let's walk back to that one again. We're not all called to preach. In fact, of all of those that will listen to this or be a part of this, myself and Pastor Cody, maybe the only two people of anyone who will watch this video out of our whole church that God has looked at and said, hey, I want to use you in preaching and teaching in a very public setting. And you know what? That's great that he's done that. I'm glad he's done that in my life. I'm proud of Cody in his life. But church, don't discount your own role as a messenger, because we're all called to be one. And so we can't get hung up on and think, Pastor, if I'm not called to preach, how am I a messenger? Well, you can be a messenger of God's love. Church, we live in a world that's craving to be genuinely loved, and not loved like we can love, because no matter how much we love someone, our love is limited, it's flawed, it's not perfect. They need to feel the love of Christ in their lives. They need to feel spiritual arms wrapped around their hearts. And we may say, and we all recognize that we don't love like Christ. Christ gave his life for us. Christ is perfect. We don't love like he does. Of course we don't. But his word teaches us some ways that we can try to sharpen our skills of loving so that we are a little bit better in doing that. Let's look at what 1 Corinthians 13 says. It says, love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy. It is not boastful. It is not arrogant. Is not rude. Is not self-seeking. Is not irritable. And does not keep a record of wrong. Love finds no joy in unrighteousness, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. Church, God gave us that passage so that we could, I believe in part, so that we could take those characteristics and work on integrating those in how we love the world around us, that our love would be kind, that our love would not envy, would just be happy for people, that love would not be boastful or arrogant or rude. It would put other people's first. These are the ways that Jesus loved us. And we're never going to get it right because we're not him. And that's okay. But we live in a world that needs our message of love. So we've got to take these characteristics of love and try to incorporate them in how we love the world around us, because they need to feel loved like this. Church, we can be messengers of hope. I talked about hope in my last midweek Bible study that I sent out, I guess it was 2 weeks ago now, how we should be filled with hope as believers in Jesus Christ. That we should be, and today we talk about we should be messengers of hope. I love how Dave Ramsey coaches his company. He says we're not just selling products, we're selling hope. And he really believes that while they are a business, their commodity is hope. So he tells the guys in the shipping that you're not shipping a book, you're shipping hope that someone can get their finances in line and not feel like their life is wrecked because of their financial situation. We live in a world that needs hope, and we need to be messengers that there's the hope that can be found in a personal relationship with a loving God. It gets back to love and hope, that things can be better for them, that their life can be enriched and God can add value to it, and that they are loved and cared for. We need to be messengers of hope. But we got to be filled with hope first, church. We can't message something that we don't have. It'd be like trying to sell a product that we don't use or we don't believe in. It'd be like if I went to a car lot and the car dealer said, well, I'd love to sell you this to it, but I tell you what, I'm never going to drive it or own it. It's a piece of junk. I wouldn't buy that. So we need to be filled with hope ourselves. And if you need to, go back to our Bible study 2 weeks ago. It's still up on our YouTube channel. Need help finding it, reach out to me. And I'll talk about why we should absolutely be filled with hope as believers in Jesus Christ. We need to be hope dealers, church. We are called to be messengers, just like Enoch was used as a messenger by God, meaning we have the message of love, we have the message of hope. Now, there's other messages that I could have thrown in here, but those are the two that I think are the most important for us to look at today and really think about. The second part was that Enoch was part of God's greater plan. Plain and simple. He was part of God's greater plan. Genesis 5:21 through 23 reads, when Enoch had lived 65 years, he fathered Methuselah. Enoch walked with God after he had fathered Methuselah 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. I don't have a lot of memories of my childhood. Like Gwen can just rattle things off that happened when she was a kid, and I don't have a lot of bad memories, but I don't have a lot of good memories either. And my childhood was very great. It's just kind of strange. But what I do remember pretty vividly is when my parents built the house that my dad still lives in. And this was designed to be my mom's dream home. And she got to pick out things that she loved, even though, it probably didn't have a lot of market value. And they've had it long enough that my dad's redone and updated quite a bit. But I remember watching the architectural drawings and my parents sitting at the kitchen table of the rental home we were living in with drawings spread out and discussing things and making decisions. And I tell you what, as I look back on that, I remember it fondly. Just a cool process just to get to drive out to that property on a regular basis and see, okay, now there's dirt moved. Well, now there's footings and a concrete floor. Well, now there's frames, and now there's a roof and siding, and to watch it go up. But church, when we think about the blueprints of a home, the footings don't have a clue about the master bedroom ceiling fan. The framing lumber doesn't really know much about the kitchen flooring. But they all have a part to play. And they are all positioned in that part very purposefully, very strategically, so that it all works together. Right? Think about that. When we think about going from blueprints to the final product, each part is incredibly important. The construction screws hold the frame of the house together that supports the things that are aesthetically pleasing. They all have a part to play. Church, it is a challenge to us to simply play our part in God's kingdom and in God's greater plan. Okay? God's got a plan for your life. I believe that. I really do. But it's not all about you. God's got a plan for my life. It's not all about me. God's got a plan for my family's life. It's not all about us. It's about God. Now, is God on an ego trip? Absolutely not. He's just very comfortable with the fact that he is the loving God and creator of the universe that holds all of this together and that works everything together to accomplish what he wants to accomplish in humankind. We all have a part to play, and God has put us where we are now, experiencing what we're experiencing now, because nothing comes into our life that does not first pass through his hands. God is allowing what we are doing now and experiencing now to shape us so that we will do what he wants us to do in 10 or 15 years, so that all works together to accomplish what he wants to accomplish. Man, it's really cool to think about that what we do today feeds into what God wants to do 10 and 15 and 20 years from now. Some of you may be thinking, I'm not going to be around in 20 years. Maybe you won't. But during your life, you have been strategically placed there by God, doing what you're doing, fulfilling your role, your part, so that God will accomplish the grander scheme of his plan. Pastor Craig Rochelle pastors a large church organization with campuses that started in Oklahoma City. Now they're based all over the world. It's Life Church. There's one coming in off, I believe it's 435 and the 152 Brighton area. They've started a campus there, and he's had his writing and his teaching has really impacted my thinking. One thing he said a couple weeks ago, he put it out on social media, is the fastest way to kill something special is to compare it to something else. See, what God has called you to do, the role he has called you to play, what he wants to do through your life is special. It's special to you. Because what God wants to do through Tim Lawson was designed for God to do that. And he's going to accomplish something through me. Whether he does that as me being a willing participant or whether I choose to drag my feet and he has to make me miserable to accomplish it. Whether it's something that's fruitful or whether part of his purpose is me being resistant and being an example of someone who failed to accomplish all that God wanted to accomplish because I didn't get on board fast enough. God's going to do something. We need to be willing to play our part, to be obedient, to look for where God is at work and to join him, to dive into the swimming pool of God's purpose and to play our part. In church, I read that quote by Pastor Craig Rochelle because it's easy to get role envy. It's easy to get part envy and to say, God, why won't you, I wish you would use me like you're using them. It's easy to look at our church and say, God, I wish you'd do through our church what you're doing through Church XYZ that's up the road and maybe is a little larger or has something going on that we wish we were going on. Church, we got a special part to play in building God's kingdom. He's got us right where he wants us. He knew we'd be where we are today. He knew that we'd be needing to take a hard look at our church today to figure out how to extend our legacy, as we look at our revitalization process and what we have to do today to position us to have an impact for a long time in the future. God knew all that, and it's all still feeding into what he wants to accomplish through our church moving forward. And we don't need to compare that to someone else. We don't need to compare that to our past or our history. We need to be willing to say, God, take us from where we are right now and help us play our part the part you have assigned, the role you have assigned in building your kingdom. Church, that can be hard to do. We all struggle with role envy or part envy. But then it takes away the joy of simply playing our part and doing what we can to build God's kingdom. Enoch, we don't know a ton about him. Beyond the fact he was a messenger, we don't get a lot more content on how God used him. But we do know, just as simply as this passage in Genesis shows us, he played his part in God's greater plan. And I think an encouraging word we get to end with is that God honored Enoch's obedience. Hebrews 11:5 says, "By faith Enoch was taken up so that he should not see death. And he was not found because God had taken him." Now before he was taken, he was commended as having pleased God. Obedience is honored by God. I will say that as a fact. I will say that as a take it to the bank, put it in the account, and you can depend on it being there fact. Obedience is honored by God. Now, this takes place in a variety of ways. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach even for our own lives. It's not like I can say, well, this is how God honors Tim's obedience. Because he honors my obedience in a variety of different ways. For Enoch, he didn't have to go through the physical process of death. Now, whether we fear death or not, most of us are a little uneasy about the process. Like, how will I expire from this earth? Will it be peaceful? Will it be gruesome? Will it be... Anyway, I don't want to drag us down with that details. But Enoch didn't have to go through any of that. He had the unique experience of being just taken up by God. Almost think about watching someone walk down a sidewalk and just watching God reach out and pluck them up. Say, yeah, this one's coming to heaven. They don't have to die. They just get to come. That's kind of cool. I mean, that's a really neat way to have your obedience honored. But it's often not going to be like that. To my knowledge, Enoch's really the only person whose obedience had been honored like this. God's going to honor our obedience. Was Enoch extraordinarily obedient? Yeah, I think he had disciplined himself well to obey the purposes of the Lord. But we can do that too. We can spend time in his word, opening it up, reading it, and then go, okay, I hear you, Lord. I hear what you've done, what you've said here, and I'm going to do my best to do it today and tomorrow and moving forward. We can develop a lifestyle of diligent obedience to biblical teaching and have our hearts ready so that when God says, hey, you go do this and be a part of this, we go, okay, I'll do that. Maybe it sounds scary, maybe it sounds hard, maybe it sounds crazy, but I'm going to do it because God told me to do it. And that's what I do when God tells me to do something. I do it. We can develop a lifestyle of obedience just like that. In church, the encouraging thing is that obedience always catches God's eye. Man, when God sees someone obeying him, he honors it. In church, while we don't obey for the reward, it is kind of nice to know that there's a reward coming. Now, I don't know what that reward looks like, because again, it's very different. Sometimes the reward really just is knowing that we pleased our Heavenly Father. And that's not too shabby of a reward right there if we think about it that way, church. But sometimes he does bestow some physical blessing upon us. Maybe it's we are obedient to biblical principles for our finances and we enjoy a comfortable existence. Maybe it's that we're obedient to the ministry that God called us to, and we get to enjoy the fulfillment of teaching a class and impacting lives like that. Again, it varies from person to person, so I can't tell you, well, this is how God's going to do it, but I can tell you he's going to. He's going to honor your obedience. It may be through this way, it may be through that way. And sometimes God does delayed honoring. Sometimes the obedience that we practice now gets honored in 10 years. And that's okay. Church, just don't I don't want us to think, well, we're just following another set of rules just to follow them. Because one, those rules are good for us to follow, but two, God always honors obedience. He did for Enoch, He will for us as well. Church, I really enjoy getting to study characters of the Bible like this. I find there's so many lessons are drawn from their lives, and I hope you will find that too. Enoch is one of the characters that we get that there's just not a ton of material on. And there's going to be some like that. Now, there's some coming up that we know a ton about because their stories take up chapters in Scripture. But today we get to learn from kind of a quieter figure. Doesn't take up very many sentences in God's Word. But man, does He teach us some powerful lessons that He served as a messenger and that we're called to be messengers. That He was a part of God's plan and we need to be enthusiastic about being a part of God's plan, but also content in what that part may look like. And we need to know that God's going to honor our obedience. Church, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I hope you're doing well. I haven't said it for a while, but if you need anything at all during this uncertain time, an errand run, if you find yourself struggling emotionally or with stress, please reach out to your staff. Call the church office. Someone will pick up and let us take care of you. Thank you so much. We love you, we appreciate you, and we look forward to seeing you real soon. Take care. Bye.